50 years had passed since humanity's exile from Council space. The galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted, especially the Council species who had once cast humans out, expecting them to perish. Supreme Admiral Minji Song stood by the large window in her quarters aboard the HSS Unity, looking out at the stars. At 73 years old, her once black hair was now completely white, and age had bent her back slightly. But her mind remained as sharp as ever, and her eyes missed nothing as she watched ships moving in the space outside. A soft chime announced a visitor. "Enter," she called, turning from the window. The door slid open to reveal her aide, Commander Hyunwoo Kang, the grandson of former Governor Ji-hoon Kang. "Supreme Admiral, the delegates have begun arriving for the signing ceremony," he reported. "President Kim requests your presence in the main hall." Minji nodded. "Tell him I'll be there shortly." After Hyunwoo left, Minji took a moment to straighten her formal uniform. The dark blue fabric was decorated with gold insignia showing her rank and the emblem of the human concordance. A stylized image of Earth surrounded by 3 stars, representing the original colony worlds that had saved humanity from extinction. The human concordance now controlled nearly a third of known space. Their territories were known for technological advancement, fair governance, and prosperity. Many non-human species had chosen to live under human protection rather than council rule, finding the humans to be more open to new ideas and less rigid in their thinking. Minji left her quarters and walked through the corridors of the massive ship. The Unity was the flagship of the human fleet and also served as a diplomatic center. Today, it orbited New Terra, the first colony world, and now the capital of human space. In the grand meeting hall, representatives from 27 different species had gathered. Some were former council members who had broken away to join the human concordance. Others were species from beyond council space who had never been part of the galactic community before humans discovered and welcomed them. President Tae-ho Kim stood at the center of the room, greeting delegates as they arrived. Once the young captain who had witnessed humanity's exile sentence, he was now in his 70s and the elected leader of all human worlds. His face had aged, but he still stood tall and proud. "Ah, Minji," he said warmly as she approached. "Just in time. The Eldorian delegation has arrived." Minji looked to where he indicated and saw the plant-like aliens entering the hall. The Eldorians had been among the first council species to establish peaceful relations with humans after their return, and now they were about to become formal allies. "It's still hard to believe sometimes," she said quietly to Tae-ho. "From exiles to empire builders in a single lifetime." Tae-ho smiled but shook his head slightly. "Not an empire," he corrected gently. "An alliance. We remember what it meant to be cast out, and we will never inflict that fate on others." Minji nodded in agreement. That had been the core principle of human expansion, to offer friendship and cooperation rather than conquest and subjugation. It was a principle that had served them well. At the far end of the hall, large doors opened to admit a small group of aliens that caused a stir among the gathered delegates. These were council representatives, including the current Supreme Counselor, who had requested permission to attend the ceremony as observers. The council, now diminished in power and influence, had been forced to recognize the human concordance 30 years ago. Since then, relations had been peaceful but distant as humans focused on building their own alliances rather than seeking revenge for past wrongs. "Shall we begin?" asked Tae-ho, glancing at the time. Minji nodded, and they made their way to the raised platform at the front of the hall. As they did, she noticed an old friend among the human delegates, Dr. Yoonji Kwon, the scientist who had first discovered the Prometheus facility technology all those years ago. Now the head of the Concordance Science Division, her discoveries had helped transform human society. When everyone was seated, Tae-ho stepped up to the podium. The room fell silent. "Distinguished delegates, honored guests," he began, his voice strong despite his age. "Today we gather to sign the Arcturus Accords, establishing formal cooperation and mutual defense between our worlds." He looked around. The room, making eye contact with representatives of many different species. 50 years ago, humanity stood alone, cast out from galactic society. We were told indirectly but clearly that we were expected to die in the darkness. Instead, we found light. On large screens around the room, images appeared showing the growth of human settlements, from the early, struggling colonies to the thriving worlds they had become. Other images showed the many species that had joined the human concordance and the peaceful relations that had developed between them. The technology we discovered in exile helped us build faster ships and better tools, continued Tejo. But our greatest strength came from something the Council never understood: our adaptability, our creativity, and our willingness to work together with others who share our values. The Council representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The current Supreme Counselor, a blue-skinned Centauri, looked particularly troubled. The Arcturus Accords are not targeted against anyone, Tejo assured them. They are an agreement to protect each other, to share knowledge, and to ensure that no species ever faces extinction due to the decisions of others. One by one, representatives from the 27 species came forward to sign the document. Each signature was met with applause from the crowd. When all had signed, Tejo stepped forward again. With these accords, we formally establish an alliance that will protect and benefit all its members. From this day forward, we move into the future together. The ceremony concluded with a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. As delegates began to mingle and celebrate, Minji found herself approached by the council observers. "Supreme Admiral Song," said the council representative with a stiff bow. "My government sends its regards." Minji nodded politely. "Your presence here is appreciated." The representative hesitated, then spoke more quietly. "I was a junior diplomat when humanity was exiled. I voted against the decision, though my voice carried no weight then." "And now?" asked Minji. "Now I wonder what might have been if we had welcomed humanity as partners rather than fearing your potential," the alien replied. Minji looked around the room at the diverse gathering of species who had chosen to ally with humans. It's never too late to build a better future. As the council representatives moved away, Tejo joined her. Together they watched the celebration unfold. Former enemies now allies, strangers now friends. "We were exiled because the council feared what humanity might become," Tejo said thoughtfully. "They were right to be afraid. Not because we sought vengeance, but because we represented change." He raised his voice to address the gathering once more. "Today, we invite all species to join us in building something greater than the old order ever imagined." The applause that followed echoed through the hall and, via quantum transmission across thousands of worlds where humans and their allies looked toward a future brighter than anyone could have predicted in the dark days of exile. From being cast out and expected to die, humanity had not only survived but had created something unprecedented: a true community of worlds based on mutual respect and cooperation. The human concordance was not an empire in the traditional sense, but its influence now reached far beyond what the council had ever achieved. And as the celebration continued, Minji Song looked out at the stars once more, thinking of how far they had come and the endless possibilities that still lay ahead. 20 years had passed since humanity was forced into exile. What had begun as desperate colonies fighting for survival had transformed into a powerful alliance of thriving worlds. The technology discovered at the Prometheus facility had changed everything. Admiral Minji Song stood on the bridge of the HSS Retribution, the flagship of humanity's new fleet. At 62 years old, her hair was now more gray than black, but her eyes were as sharp as ever as she surveyed her command crew. The Retribution was unlike any ship humanity had built before their exile. Sleek and powerful, it incorporated technologies that the Council races couldn't even comprehend. Its hull gleamed with a special metal alloy that could absorb energy weapons, and its engines could propel it through space at speeds that would have seemed impossible just a decade ago. "All systems operational, Admiral," reported First Officer Jin Woo Beck from his station. "The fleet awaits your command." Minji nodded with satisfaction. Behind the Retribution, 37 warships and support vessels hung in space, ready. to move. This was just one of 3 fleets humanity had built in secret, far from the prying eyes of Council observers. "Open a channel to all ships," she ordered. When the communication officer nodded that the channel was open, Minji spoke clearly and confidently. "This is Admiral Song. Today, we return to the stars we once called home. Not as refugees or suppliants, but as equals. Remember your training and follow the mission plan. Song out." With that simple order, the human fleet activated their advanced engines and disappeared into faster-than-light travel, heading toward Council space for the first time in 2 decades. But they did not approach with weapons charged or shields raised. That was not the plan that humanity's leaders had agreed upon after long debate. Instead, 3 days later, they emerged at an abandoned star system just at the edge of Council territory. The system had a small, rocky planet that the Council had never bothered to colonize or even name. It was here that humanity would establish its first foothold, a trading outpost called New Horizon. "Begin deployment of the station modules," ordered Minji once they had secured the system. For the next month, the human fleet worked to establish the trading post. They built a space station in orbit around the planet and landing facilities on the surface. They made no attempt to hide their presence. In fact, they broadcasted an open signal announcing the establishment of a free trading zone open to all species. Then they waited. It took 2 weeks for the first non-human ship to arrive, a small merchant vessel from a minor council race called the Ventari. The furry short traders were hesitant at first, clearly worried about dealing with the exiled humans. But their caution vanished when they saw what the humans offered. Rare minerals from beyond Council space, new medicines derived from plants, unknown to Council botanists, and technology that was just advanced enough to be valuable without revealing humanity's true capabilities. The Ventari traders left with full cargo holds and spread the word. Soon more merchants arrived from a dozen different species. Information flowed back to the Council, rumors of human prosperity beyond the outer rim, tales of fair deals and unusual goods. 3 months after the establishment of New Horizon, a Council peacekeeping force finally arrived to investigate. 5 large warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel, weapon systems active and ready. Admiral Minji watched them approach from the bridge of the Retribution, which had remained at New Horizon as the station's protector. "They're scanning us," reported the tactical officer. "Should we activate our defensive systems?" Minji shook her head. "No. Let them look. They won't understand what they're seeing anyway." The Council ships surrounded the human station but did not attack. Instead, they sent a communication request. On the main screen, the face of a Council commander appeared. He was from the Aldorian species, plant-like beings with green skin and leaves instead of hair. "This is Commander Thalax of the Council Peacekeeping Force," he said stiffly. "You are in violation of the Exile Decree. Identify yourselves." Minji stepped forward where he could see her. "This is Admiral Minji Song of the Human Stellar Navy. We are simply operating a trading post. We have not settled in Council space, merely established a place where mutual exchange can occur." The commander looked confused. Humans were expected to... He stopped himself. "To perish in exile?" Minji finished for him. "I'm afraid we disappointed you. We not only survived but thrived." Before the commander could respond, another transmission came through. This one was from the surface of the planet, where the human diplomatic team had established their headquarters. "Admiral, the Council diplomatic vessel has arrived. Ambassador Park requests your presence for the meeting." Minji allowed herself a small smile. "Inform the ambassador I'll be down shortly." She turned back to the Council commander. "If you'll excuse me, it seems I have a diplomatic function to attend." She cut the transmission before he could respond, and headed to the shuttle bay. On the planet's surface, in a simple but elegant building, constructed for this very purpose, Ambassador Juwon Park prepared to meet with the Council representatives. Now in her 60s, but still a formidable diplomat, she adjusted her formal blue uniform and checked her appearance one last time. 20 years ago, she had stood before the Council as they pronounced humanity's exile. Now, she would face them, Again, but under very different circumstances. When the council delegation entered the meeting room, she recognized Supreme Counselor Virilax immediately. Though 20 years older, the four-armed alien still carried himself with the same arrogance. "Ambassador Park," he said, his voice betraying his surprise. "I did not expect to see you again." Juwan smiled politely. "Life is full of surprises. Supreme Counselor, please be seated." As Minji arrived and took her place behind the ambassador, the council delegation looked around nervously. They had clearly expected to find struggling refugees, not a confident, well-equipped civilization. "We wish to negotiate a new relationship with the council," Juwan announced once the formalities were complete. "Not as subjects, but as equals." Supreme Counselor Virilax stared at her in disbelief. "You were meant to perish in exile," he said, finally admitting what the council had intended all along. "The uncharted territories are filled with dangers, radiation, storms, hostile species, resource scarcity. Instead," replied Juwan with a slight smile, "we found our destiny. Humanity has established 3 major colony worlds with a combined population of over 12 billion. We have developed technologies and medicines that could benefit all species, including those in council space." She slid a data pad across the table. "This is our proposal for diplomatic recognition and mutual trade agreements." As Virilax reluctantly took the pad, Minji watched the other council representatives whispering among themselves. They were beginning to realize that the humans they had cast aside had returned stronger than anyone could have imagined. Outside the meeting room, human ships patrolled the system. At the edge of council space, more human outposts were being established. The exile had not destroyed humanity. It had merely delayed their rise. And as the negotiations began in earnest, both Minji and Juwan knew this was just the beginning. The council would soon learn just how much humanity had changed during their 20 years in exile, and what they had discovered in the darkness beyond the stars. 10 years had passed since humanity was forced into exile. The 3 main settlements had grown into proper colonies, with millions of people living and working on planets far from council space. Humans had adapted to their new homes, but they never forgot what had been taken from them. The explorer ship Horizon moved silently through space, its engines barely making a sound. Captain Sungmin Yoon sat in the command chair, watching as his crew worked at their stations. The ship was one of the new Pathfinder vessels, designed to travel quickly and remain hidden from council sensors. "Status report," Sungmin said, his voice calm and steady. Navigation Officer Yuna Kim looked up from her screen. "We are entering the outer edge of the asteroid field, Captain. No sign of council patrols. This particular asteroid field was located between human territory and council space. The Horizon's mission was to place sensor beacons throughout the field to give early warning if council ships ever approached." "Proceed with caution," Sungmin ordered. "Tactical, keep all systems on low power. We don't want to be detected." Tactical, Officer Junseo Bay nodded. "Yes, Captain. All systems running silent." The Horizon moved deeper into the asteroid field. Huge rocks and chunks of ice floated around them, some as small as a human hand, others larger than the ship itself. The navigation team carefully plotted a course through the dangerous maze. Suddenly, the ship's sensors beeped softly. "Captain, I'm detecting unusual energy readings from that large asteroid ahead," reported Science Officer Yoon Ji Kwon. She pointed to a massive, oddly shaped rock on the main screen. Sungmin leaned forward in his chair. "What kind of energy?" "Nothing I've ever seen before," Yoonji said, her eyes wide with excitement. "It's not similar to any council technology. The pattern is completely different. This was unexpected. The asteroid field should have been empty except for the rocks themselves." Sungmin had a decision to make. The safest choice would be to place the beacons and return to New Seoul as planned. But curiosity was a powerful human trait, one that the council had always tried to control. "Helm, take us closer," he ordered. "Tactical, be ready to leave quickly if needed." The Horizon moved toward the large asteroid. As they got closer, they could see it wasn't a natural formation. Parts of it were too smooth, too regular. "It's artificial," Yunji said in amazement. "At least partially. Someone hollowed out that asteroid and built something inside it." Scans showed an opening large enough for the horizon to enter. After careful consideration, Sung Min gave the order, and the ship slowly moved into the dark entrance of the asteroid. Inside, they found an enormous hollow space. Their ship's lights revealed what looked like an abandoned base or facility. The architecture was like nothing they had ever seen before, with curved walls and strange symbols carved into the surfaces. "This predates Council technology," Yunji said after studying their sensor readings. "Based on the decay patterns, this facility is at least 50,000 years old." Sungmin ordered a team to suit up and explore the facility. He led the group himself, along with Yunji and 4 security officers. They floated through the airless facility, their suit lights illuminating rooms that had not seen visitors in millennia. In the center of the facility, they found what looked like a control room. Strange devices lined the walls, and in the middle stood a pedestal with a glowing blue crystal. "Incredible," whispered Yunji, examining the crystal without touching it. "This is still active after all this time. The energy readings are off the charts." One of the security officers discovered a hidden door, which led to an even larger chamber. When they entered, everyone fell silent in awe. The chamber contained what could only be described as technology, but far beyond anything humans or even the Council species had developed. There were devices that seemed to bend light around them, crystals that floated without support, and machines whose purpose they couldn't begin to guess. "These aren't just weapons or ships," Yunji said as she carefully examined the artifacts. "This is fundamental technology, manipulation of space-time itself." After gathering as much data as they could, the team returned to the horizon. "Captain," Sungmin made an immediate decision. This discovery was too important to share over regular communications. They needed to return to New Seoul immediately. 3 days later, the Horizon docked at Orbital Station 1 above New Seoul. Captain Sungmin and Science Officer Yunji were immediately taken to meet with Governor Ji-hoon Kang and the colony's leadership council. In a secure room deep within the government building, Yunji showed them the recordings and data from the asteroid facility. "Based on my initial analysis, this civilization was far more advanced than the Council species," she explained. "They appear to have mastered technologies that the Council has only theorized about." Chief Engineer Do-Yun Choi, now the head of New Seoul's research division, studied the data with intense interest. "The power generation alone is revolutionary. If we could understand it, we could produce 10 times the energy with half the resources, Governor." Ji-hoon listened carefully to all the reports before speaking. "The question is, what do we do with this discovery?" Fleet Commander Min Ji-song, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "We keep it secret from the Council. If they learn about this, they will send everything they have to take it from us." Everyone agreed. The findings would be shared only among the 3 human settlements. Research teams would be assembled to study the facility and its technology, but all ships traveling to and from the asteroid would use random routes and maximum stealth. Over the next 3 years, the research proceeded in secret. Teams of scientists worked in shifts at the asteroid facility, which they codenamed Prometheus, after the figure from human mythology who gave fire to humanity. Meanwhile, Council scout ships occasionally ventured near human territory, checking to see if the exiled species had survived. What they found seemed to confirm their expectations. Small colonies struggling on harsh planets with limited technology and no military power worth mentioning. What they didn't know was that these appearances were carefully maintained deceptions. The real work of humanity happened below ground in shielded facilities or in the hidden Prometheus base. "We've cracked the propulsion system," Do-Yun announced one day after years of research. Her team had been working on one of the smaller devices from the facility. "With this, our ships can travel 10 times faster than anything the Council has. Their fastest journey of a month would take us 3 days." The news spread quickly through the human leadership. Governor Ji-hoon called an emergency assembly of all settlement leaders, connecting via secure quantum channels that the Council couldn't detect or intercept. "My fellow leaders," he said to the gathered representatives from all 3 colonies, The question facing us is no longer if we can survive out here. He paused, looking at each face in turn. It's what we intend to become. On screens around the room, data from the Prometheus research flashed. Designs for new ships, new weapons, new ways of traveling through space. With this technology, humanity would not just equal the Council, they would surpass it. The Council exiled us because they feared what we might become. Ji-hoon continued. It's time to show them their fears were justified. As the Assembly discussed plans for humanity's future, deep in the Prometheus facility, the ancient technology continued to glow, as if pleased to be useful once again after thousands of years of silence. 5 years had passed since humanity's exile from Council space. The massive human Exodus fleet had split into 3 main groups, each establishing new homes in different star systems within the uncharted territories. Chief Engineer Do-Yun Choi wiped sweat from her forehead as she worked under the hot sun of Arcturus IV, the planet they now called New Sol. What had begun as a collection of prefabricated shelters and emergency structures had grown into a thriving city of over 2 million. People. Do-Yun adjusted her tool belt and looked up at the towering atmospheric processor she had helped design. The machine rumbled with power as it converted the planet's thin air into something humans could breathe more easily. Similar machines dotted the landscape around the city, gradually changing the planet to better suit human needs. How are the readings today? Asked a voice behind her. Do-Yun turned to see Governor Ji-hoon Kang approaching. Unlike many officials back in Council space who wore fancy clothes to show their importance, Ji-hoon dressed in simple working clothes just like everyone else. His hands were rough from helping build the colony, and his face was tanned from working outdoors. The quantum core is running at 128% efficiency, Do-Yun reported with pride. We have now surpassed even Earth's energy production capabilities. Ji-hoon smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Not bad for a bunch of exiles on a forgotten planet. Do-Yun nodded in agreement. When they had first arrived on this world, many people had feared they would not survive. The planet was colder than Earth, with longer nights and harsher storms. But humans had adapted, as they always did. Come, said Ji-hoon. There's a council, meeting in an hour. We need your report on the new power systems. They walked together through the busy streets of New Sol. The buildings were a mix of prefabricated units from the Exodus ships and new structures built from local materials. People moved with purpose, carrying tools or supplies. Children ran between buildings, laughing as they played games. 5 years ago, these same people had been refugees, forced to leave their homes with only what they could carry. Now they were pioneers, building a new life beyond the reach of the Galactic Council. In orbit above New Sol, the shipyards worked day and night. What had begun as necessary defensive measures were evolving into something more ambitious. Fleet Commander Min-ji Song stood on the observation deck of Orbital Station 1, watching as workers in spacesuits moved around the frame of a new ship. Unlike the bulky Exodus vessels, this new generation of ships was sleek and fast. The Pathfinder vessels are almost ready, reported her assistant Dae-jung Lee. The first 5 will be completed by the end of the month. Min-ji nodded with satisfaction. Good. We can begin mapping the remainder of this sector as planned. Without the Council's restrictive technology treaties, human innovation had accelerated at an incredible rate. Necessity drove invention, and the harsh environments of their new homes demanded creative solutions. Engineers like Do-Yun were free to experiment with designs that would have been forbidden in Council space. Back on the surface, Do-Yun and Ji-hoon entered the colony's central government building. Made from local stone and metal, it stood as a symbol of humanity's determination to build something lasting on this new world. Inside the main meeting room, representatives from different parts of the settlement were gathering, some joined by video link from distant outposts. On a large screen at the front of the room, the faces of leaders from the other 2 major human settlements could be seen. New Terra in the Proxima system, and New Hope in the Tau Ceti system. Let's begin, said Ji-hoon once everyone was settled. First, reports from each settlement. The leader of New Terra, an older woman named Hee-jin Park, spoke first. Our agricultural domes are now producing at 150% of projected capacity. We have food surpluses for the first time since arrival. This was met with applause. Food security had been one of their biggest challenges. Next, the leader of New Hope, Jun-Ho Shin, gave his report. Mining operations have discovered rich deposits of rare minerals in the northern mountains. These will be crucial for our technology development. Du-Yun listened with interest. Each settlement had faced different challenges based on their planets, but all three were now firmly established and growing. When it was her turn to speak, Do-Yun stood and activated her data tablet. The new quantum power cores are exceeding all expectations, she reported. With this energy output, we can power not just our current cities, but support expansion at 3 times our current rate. She showed them diagrams of the improved design. Without council restrictions on quantum research, we've made advances in 5 years that would have taken 50 under their rules. The meeting continued for another hour, with reports from medical teams, security forces, and education directors. Despite challenges, humanity was not merely surviving in exile, they were thriving. After the meeting, Do-Yun joined Minji at the shipyard control center. Through the large windows, they could see the massive construction platforms where the new ships were being built. The Pathfinder ships will change everything, said Minji. With their range and speed, we can explore far beyond our current territories. Do-Yun nodded. And the new scanner technology will let us detect council patrols long before they find us. Neither woman said what they were both thinking, that these ships were not just for exploration. They were the beginning of something greater. That evening, as the twin moons of New Seoul rose in the sky, Do-Yun stood on the roof of her apartment building, looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth, the home planet humanity had been forced to leave behind, and somewhere else was the Galactic Council, who had believed that exiling humans would lead to their extinction. How wrong they had been. A sudden light streaked across the sky, one of the defense satellites in low orbit, keeping watch for any signs of council ships. So far, none had ventured this deep into uncharted space, but humanity remained vigilant. In the distance, the atmospheric processors hummed, gradually transforming the planet. New buildings rose every day as more living space was needed for the growing population. Children born here would know no other home than New Seoul. Do-Yun smiled to herself. The council had meant exile as a punishment, a death sentence for a species they feared and failed to understand. Instead, they had given humanity the greatest gift possible: freedom. In the shipyards above, the first Pathfinder vessel's engines flickered to life, undergoing initial testing. Soon, humans would venture out into the galaxy again, not as the Council's subjects, but as the masters of their own destiny. The settlement phase was ending. The next chapter of humanity's story in the stars was about to begin. Captain Tae-Ho Kim stood tall in his blue uniform despite the weight pressing down on his shoulders. The circular chamber of the Galactic Council towered around him, with 7 different alien representatives sitting on high platforms. Their eyes, some with multiple pupils and others glowing with strange colors, all looked down at him with coldness. "The Council has reached its decision," said Supreme Councilor Virilax, his gray skin shimmering under the bright lights. His forearms moved in formal gestures as he spoke. "Humanity has been found guilty of excessive aggression, unpredictable behavior, and dangerous technological innovation." Tae-Ho felt his heart sink, but kept his face neutral. He had expected this outcome, but hearing it made it real. "The punishment is exile from all council territories," continued Virilax. "Humanity will have 3 standard months to remove all presence from council space." The 7 council members nodded in agreement. The Eldorian representative, with her plant-like features, seemed almost sad. The others showed no emotion at all. Tae-Ho opened his mouth to speak, wanting to remind them how humans had fought alongside council forces during the Void War just 5 years ago. How human soldiers had died protecting Proxima colonies. But before he could say anything, he felt a gentle touch on his arm. Dr. Ju-Won Park, Earth's chief ambassador, shook her head slightly. Her gray-streaked hair was pulled back neatly, and her dark eyes communicated a clear message. "Save your breath. We expected this," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Operation Diaspora is already underway." Tejo nodded and closed his mouth. The council had clearly made their decision long before this show trial began. "Does Earth wish to make a final statement?" asked Virilax, his tone suggesting he did not care either way. Ju-Wan stepped forward, her simple black diplomatic uniform, a stark contrast to the colorful garments of the council members. "The people of Earth and her colonies accept your judgment," she said, her voice steady and clear. "We will comply with the exile order. But remember this day well, Honorable Council members. The galaxy is vast, and paths that diverge may one day cross again." With those words, she bowed slightly and turned to leave. Tejo followed her, feeling the stares of the council members on his back. Outside the chamber, in the gleaming white hallway of the council tower, Ju-Wan's formal demeanor dropped. "We have work to do," she said, walking quickly toward their shuttle. "The evacuation of New Mars colony begins tomorrow, Titan base the day after." "How many people do we need to move?" asked Tejo, struggling to keep up with her brisk pace. "Just over 12 million from the outer colonies. Another 4 billion from the inner systems," she replied. "The Exodus ships are already being prepared." Tejo stopped walking. "That's impossible. We don't have enough ships to move that many people in 3 months. Ju-Wan turned to face him, a small smile on her lips. "Like I said, we expected this. The Council has been building toward this decision for years. Do you think Earth leadership just sat and waited? Operation Diaspora has been in planning for a decade." For the first time that day, Tejo felt a spark of hope. The next 3 months passed in a blur of activity. Tejo was assigned to oversee the evacuation of the Jupiter colonies, where nearly 2 million humans lived in floating cities within the gas giant's upper atmosphere. Day and night, massive Exodus ships arrived, loaded people and essential equipment, and departed toward the uncharted regions beyond the outer rim, areas the Council species considered worthless and dangerous. Council observers watched the evacuation with cold eyes, making sure humans took nothing that violated the exile terms. Earth could keep its basic technology, but had to leave behind all military installations and advanced research facilities. What the Council didn't know was that the most important thing humans were taking couldn't be seen or measured. Knowledge, stored in secure data cores, and the determination to not just survive but thrive. On the final day of the evacuation, Tejo stood on the bridge of the flagship New Dawn, a massive colony ship carrying over 500,000 people. Through the viewscreen, he watched as the last shuttles left Jupiter's swirling clouds heading toward them. "That's the last of them," reported his second-in-command, Sujin Yoon. "All Jupiter colonies are now empty." Similar reports came in from across the solar system and from the outer colonies. Against all odds, the evacuation was complete, 1 day ahead of schedule. Admiral Hanul Lee, the highest-ranking military officer remaining after Earth's forced disarmament, requested an open channel to all Exodus ships. "My fellow humans," he began, his voice reaching every ship in the fleet. "Today we leave behind worlds we built with our hands and hearts. The Council believes they have defeated us by sending us into the unknown. But I say they have merely set us free." He paused, letting his words sink in. "For too long we have been held back by Council regulations and technology treaties. They feared our creativity, our adaptability, our drive to improve and grow. Now we go to places where their rules do not apply." Tejo looked around the bridge. Every crew member stood straight, listening intently. Some had tears in their eyes, but all had determination on their faces. "We face hardship ahead," continued the Admiral. "The uncharted regions are dangerous. But remember this: humanity was born on a single world, under a single sun. Everything we built beyond Earth, we built against the odds. Now we will do it again, and we will build something greater than before." As the Exodus fleet approached the boundary marker that separated Council space from the uncharted regions, a small group of Council ships appeared nearby, watching. "They're making sure we leave," said Sujin with a hint of bitterness. Tejo nodded. and they'll regret it someday. The New Dawn was the last ship to cross the boundary. As they passed the marker, Admiral Lee spoke one final time to the Council observers. "Remember us," he said simply, then cut the transmission. The Exodus fleet engaged their engines to full power and moved away from Council space in 3 large groups, each heading to different star systems that early scout ships had identified as potentially habitable. Tejo stood at the view screen long after the Council ships had disappeared from their sensors. He thought about Earth, the blue planet he might never see again. He thought about the colonies humans had built, now abandoned, but mostly, he thought about the future. "Captain," called Su-Jin, breaking his thoughts. "The Admiral has called. A meeting of all ship commanders." Tejo nodded. "It's time to plan our new beginning." As he walked off the bridge, he felt something he didn't expect: excitement. Humanity had been cast out, but they were not defeated. They were just getting started.